Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Derek Doepker, author of Break Through Your BS. Derek, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you on. We've kind of been running in the same circles for the past few years, so I'm glad we got to connect, and I'm really looking forward to having you share your knowledge with us on the show today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too.
All right, my friend. Well, let's get started. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
One piece of advice I'd give, and I know it's probably going to sound a little bit biased because I'm a coach. I have training programs, but you don't have to get it from me. I would say go somewhere to get guidance. And that could be, preferably some sort of mentor or coach who can give you personal feedback. But at the very least, other people out there have figured this process out. Everything from the mindset of overcoming who am I to write a book? What do I have to offer? Some of these early challenges that I had when I was writing my first book, to the practical things of formatting, to the area of how to best market your book. Someone's figured all that out, and it might sound also obvious to some people, but I can't tell you how much, like working with thousands of authors, the emails that I get from people saying, I don't know what to do, I'm stuck, I'm spinning my wheels. And it's usually one of two issues. I go, what's your plan? They don't have one, which I'm like, how do you not have a plan? There's so much information out there. Or alternatively, it's because there is so much information out there. People are confused. They hear conflicting advice. They have actually too many courses and programs and things that they're checking out, in which case the advice is actually really just find one proven plan. Find one plan that works, stick with it. You can always add things later or tweak things later if it doesn't work. An author would drive themselves crazy, or an aspiring author would drive themselves crazy if they think they're going to do every little possible book marketing and writing technique out there. So ultimately it comes down, get a proven plan and get some guidance on it when it comes to writing your first book.
And one of the things we always talk about is utilizing a proven system that works. And when you do work with people, guides, coaches, publishers, people that have been there, that have gone through the trenches, and also realize the things that change. Because as you know, things change constantly. With Amazon, everyone used to always put their paperbacks in CreateSpace. Well, Amazon absorbed them, so now everything's now through Amazon. So it's just one of those things where you've really got to keep track of the trends. And when you have someone that does that, it just makes your own journey so much easier. Because I think right now it is more challenging than ever to really get a book out there successfully without help.
That's exactly it. Yeah, there's certain principles that are going to remain evergreen. And then there's things like you're talking about when it comes to Amazon and the marketplace that are shifting and changing. So you want to have someone that can give you the heads up, because if you try to figure it out yourself, by the time you figure it out, things may have already changed again, and then you're constantly playing catch up.
Exactly. Well, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
This is going to vary on an individual basis. I'll say what I've seen as a trend with myself, with students, with authors that I've talked to. The hardest part is actually getting out of your own way. Most of the time, the biggest issues, like the information of what to do, is out there, right? It's, here's how you, again, format a book, or here's how you publish. You can find free things on that podcast, courses, training programs. The information is plentiful. The hardest thing is actually the mindset issues. And I know mindset's thrown around a lot, at least in my world of personal development. And I really trace it back, and I'll give an example. An author I worked with, Rosina, helped her publish her first book, and it took months and months of helping her, times where she's at one point breaking down in tears She's not sure she can do it. She's not sure all these changes that need to be made to the book. And questioning, can I really do this? Who is my message for? All of these things. But then once she got her first book done, within a matter of a couple months, she's like, I'm ready to do my next book. And she just knocked her next book right out, which was a journal. And it's like, all she had to do was get one done and go, oh, that's it. I can do that. So I think for the first time author getting published, it's just getting that first one done and all of the internal blocks to that. But if you can get your first book done, something I did with my first book is this doesn't need to be my masterpiece. This doesn't need to even sell that many copies. I somehow just had this sense of, I just need to go through the process, get a book done, know that I can do it. Then on my next book, I can focus on really making sure that one's, something that's really great and put a lot of energy behind it. And I'm not saying that's the approach for everyone, but I think for myself and for many authors that I work with, the more you can just get something done, then you prove to yourself that you can do it. And then everything after that is so much easier, both practically speaking, as well as from the internal belief system standpoint.
Absolutely. And the thing is, at the end of the day, I think one of the biggest challenges is imposter syndrome. What people have to realize, everyone is an expert in something. We've all got something out there great that we can share with the world. So there's two mantras that I always talk about. One is, don't be afraid to take the plunge. And two, done is better than perfect. Just get it out there. If there are issues, you can fix it later.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about marketing, because I know that's one of your great strengths. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launches, because you've had multiple books over the years that has worked well.
Well, one of the big challenges when I started out, and this is going to be true for any first-time author, is I don't have an audience. Who's going to want to listen to me? I'm a no-name. When I started out, I was a no-name, broke ballet parker. And so that also contributed to the imposter syndrome feeling. But I was also looking at it practically and going, well, it takes hundreds, thousands of book sales to hit bestseller status, at least if you want to be in a competitive category like I was of weight loss when I first started out, or fitness. So the marketing strategy that I found worked well for me then and continues to this day, and is something that will, I think, forever be one of the absolute best ways to sell books, is influencer marketing. And what I mean by influencer marketing is, well, first of all, I would ask anyone listening to this, how many books have you purchased because someone else recommended it? Not just directly the author, maybe a friend or someone that you trust recommended a book. And I recently went on my Amazon order page, and I'm like, I feel like I think it was over 50% of the books that I saw on there. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember so-and-so recommended that book. I remember another person recommended that book. And I just hear these recommendations from people I trust, and that's where I'm making a lot of my purchasing decisions. So if you can get other people, other influencers who've built the audience of people, who've built an audience of your ideal prospective readers, then all you need to do is connect with them and then have them share it with their audience. And I say all you need to do as if it's, if only it were as simple as just sending them an email and asking them to do that. There's more to it than that, which I can touch upon briefly. But the idea is, what I did early on was I started to cultivate some of these relationships. So then when my book launched, even though I didn't have a big audience to promote my book towards, I just had a handful of other people who had an audience. They shared my book with their audience, and that's led to, collectively thousands and thousands of sales over my time as an author. I can trace back directly as a result of emails sent by someone else, by another influencer who shared my book with their audience. In terms of how to do that, that could be a whole nother conversation. And I'll say that a quick way of approaching it is always going in with, what can I give? How can I provide value for this person? A real simple thing is, maybe you mention them in your book. Maybe you mention them on your thank you page. Maybe you're recommending them to your audience and sharing their work. So these are some ways you can start cultivating those relationships, and then going in without an expectation of getting something in return. And when you do that, that can go a long way towards building these relationships and then having other people start to help you grow your audience.
Well, let's take a little deeper dive into this. So, one, that's an absolutely brilliant strategy. So, what were some of the things that you did to build those relationships specifically? You mentioned that you give. So, let's kind of walk back a few years back when you started this strategy. How did you reach out to them, and what was your approach?
So really important with the how to reach out. I actually had someone say, she commented, she said, I think she said, like, you're a rock star with this approach or something, the way I sent her this email. So what I did was something that anyone could have done. And that is I recorded approximately a 1 to 2 minute personal video. So I get a webcam, get a microphone, it takes a minute or two, and introduce yourself to the person. And if you think about it, I mean, how many times do you just get just emails, just ordinary emails, compared to how many times you get someone that actually sends you a personal video, mentioning you by name, or even a voice message on like Facebook Messenger or something? That extra little step goes a long way towards getting their attention and showing them that you have actually taken the time to personally reach out to them. The contents of that is really starting with a compliment, something that I appreciate about them, why I'm connecting with them, and then a follow up to let them know, or then mentioning, I have something that your audience might be interested in, and then talking about a little bit about the book. But it's not a whole big long pitch, right? It's just a 1 or 2 minute introduction, saying what I appreciate about them, what I admire about them, letting them know we're in the same space, and then letting them know that I have a book coming out that their audience might benefit from. So it's always about them and their audience. The other thing is I've already given at this point, because I might mention, hey, I mentioned your blog in my book. Hey, I've been telling my followers about you. So at this point, I've already have been sharing their work. Even though I had started out with a small audience, it's still just the fact that you're willing to share their work. That's one of the gives. And a more strategic approach, which I don't do with every book, but I have done in a couple books, is I even say, I'd love to feature more of your work for my audience. Would you be open to contributing a bonus chapter to my book? And I make it even easier on them by saying, I can just take a piece of content that you've already created and include it for you, and just link back to anything that you'd like. So they have virtually no work that they need to do. But now, by them being inside my book, they're getting free exposure. The better my book does, or the better your book does, if you take this approach, the more eyeballs are going to be going back to their work. So it's turning competitors into collaborators. And when they get that, they'll see, wait a second, if I share this author's book and it becomes really successful, that's all the more people who are ultimately going to potentially discover my work, because I am mentioned in this book. So there's a what's in it for them that's very clear for them with that approach. But at the same time, I think building relationships is something that can be done constantly. And things like going on podcasts like this is a great way to cultivate relationships, contributing to their blogs, contributing to their communities, sharing if they have Facebook groups, and adding, it's a cliche thing to say, adding value, but that really, I mean, I guess that's the simplest way to put it. You're contributing something to them so you get on their radar and they get to begin to know, like, and trust you.
Well, I absolutely love your strategy, and that's one of the things people miss is you don't necessarily need to send just an email with a bunch of text in it. Send in a video, having that link on there, and the fact that you've personalized it. You've talked about, you've mentioned their blog. You've talked about, nice compliment. You talk about, hey, I got something your audience might be interested in. I read this recent blog of yours. I can repurpose that, use it as a bonus chapter. We could also put a link in there back to your website. Would you be cool with that? That is essentially a win-win across the board.
Yeah, it's pure advertisement for them. No additional effort on their part, not other than to just reply and say, yeah, go ahead. And that ties into another principle of persuasion, negotiation, whatever you want to call it, in the sense of make it easy on them, reduce the friction. Like, you make it, and that's again another topic we can dive into, but you show them how it's such a no-brainer for them to do, and you take away so much of the work. And that could even go, hey, I'll give you an email that you can send to your audience about this book. This would probably be in a follow-up conversation. But if you're asking someone to share your book with their audience, write the email for them, write the post. And of course, it could be a template you use with multiple people, but that's just one less piece of effort on their part that you've done, and it just makes it that much easier for them to say yes.
Absolutely, it's just cut and paste essentially.
Hmm.
So, how many of these influencers were you able to get with your book launch?
For my first book, I'd have to go back and look at the how many bonus chapters there are. I want to say like 3 to 5, 5 or so. I don't know if all the, but then I had some other people who didn't necessarily contribute a bonus chapter. I believe, if I recall correctly, I also had some other people share it. Some people it was to their email list. Some people they just tweeted about it, which is not quite the same level of impact, but the fact that they were willing to share it was good. And then since then, it's been more and more people with book launches, and I can say it gets after you have these relationships, it can get very there's a lot of setup that goes into cultivating a relationship, but eventually now it's just reaching out to a fellow author and be like, hey, I got a new book coming out. Would you sound like a fit for your audience? And be like, yeah, sure, let me know, and I'll send an email about it. And it's the same thing back in return. I know they do good work. I'd probably be recommending their book. I would only recommend something if I was going to recommend it anyway. And it's not like this is a paid thing. So they got a book out. For instance, I know Steve Scott, S.J. Scott. If he puts something out, I know it's good, and it ties in habits and personal development with my audience. He can send me an email and I'll share it with my audience. Stephen Geist does really good stuff, although he's not like a constantly publishing books, but he's got a couple books. So I promoted his book, Mini Habits, right? And so once you have the relationship, it can really be like a one-line email that you send to them, and they'll. I'm not going to say this is always going to happen, but a lot of times people will be willing to do things at that point. And so you can go through your Rolodex and just be like, who do I know? Who's already willing to promote me? Send out a few emails. You got your next book launch, and then boom, they're all or many of them would end up promoting you.
I think that's an absolute brilliant strategy, because then you can also utilize it for things outside of a launch too. Different informational products. I know you have a lot of different things that you offer. In fact, I think I actually bought your audiobook program a few years back.
Yep. And also going through your network basically what we're really talking about is the value of relationships here.
Yep.
So I just sent an email out, someone I know, and say, hey, could you introduce me to a podcast host that I knew? And he was willing to do that. But we've gone back and forth and helped each other out for years and stuff. So I have no expectation that he's going to do it. But if he asks for something from me, I do it for him. You do it for me. And that's just what happens when you start to cultivate genuine relationships. These are friendships, really. And so it's not like, oh, I'll scratch your back only if you scratch mine. It's just, what can I do for you? So if you're going in with that, how can I serve and support you? People will oftentimes reciprocate.
Well, speaking of books, I'd like to know, what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
It'd be hard to say that there's a number one book. One of the books, though, that stands out for me was T. Harv Eker's Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. When I read that years ago, one of the first personal development books I read, and it really helped me discover that I had such a scarcity mindset and move more towards an abundance mindset. And one thing I recall, I don't know why this one in particular stood out, but it's the idea of like rich or successful people play to win, poor people play not to lose. And I think it stands out because I see my tendency to want to avoid loss far more than trying to actually go, how can I win? And so much of that applies to business, where it's going into these strategies where you want to launch a book. Sometimes you got to go all in. You got to play to win. If you're kind of holding back, you won't hit bestseller status by holding back, at least not in a competitive category. You really got to go all in. And it's a little scary, but that's what it takes. Or it can be scary. It can also be exciting. That's what it takes if you really want to break through. Is you got to go, okay, I got to put everything I can into this launch in order to break through the competition.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
I'd say Jim Rohn. A quote from Jim Rohn: "We all must suffer one of two pains, either the pain of discipline or the pain of regret and disappointment." And it reminds me this really stood out to me when I was thinking about moving to Los Angeles to pursue my dreams back in 2010. I was thinking about this and I go, okay, it's not so much the discipline aspect, but the idea that if I play it safe, I don't want to look back 5, 10, 15 years from now and think to myself, what if, and have to live with that regret. So I'd rather discipline myself now and go for it and take a chance than, and there might be failure there and that might hurt. So what I like about it is it's not saying you're going to avoid pain. It's not saying you're going to get through life unscathed. It's not saying there isn't going to be some potential failure when you pursue these things. I mean, it sucks if I try something, if I put money into a marketing campaign and it doesn't work. It's going to hurt. I have to realize it would hurt more if I would have looked back and said, well, what if I would have done it? What did I miss out on because I never went for it? I never took that chance. And that's why I love that quote.
And I love that you mentioned that, because that was one of my biggest things when I left my teaching job in 2017 to focus full on with my publishing company. And that was the biggest thing. I did not want to go through answering the question, what if? Because I think regret is worse than any consequence in life. Whether you're going to succeed or fail, what's going to happen is going to happen. But if you don't try, I think regret's the worst thing we can deal with.
Exactly.
Well, Derek, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Well, thank you, Paul, for having me on. The best way, you can get a free copy of my book, Why Authors Fail, at bestsellersecrets.com. And you'll also get access to the daily newsletter with tips and other insights on self-publishing. And then you can find my books, whether on authorship or personal development or fitness, all on Amazon.com. If you search for Derek Doepker, DerekDoepker.
Well, Derek, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.